Hello and welcome back to the latest We Are Sunderland briefing with myself, Dom Short and Scott Wilson, both from We Are Sunderland. And a thanks as ever to our partners, Cospex Opticians and the Fans Museum. Do subscribe if you haven't already to We Are Sunderland. That's just £1 for 6 months or £12 for the full year for full access to everything we write on there. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, then obviously top subscribe if you haven't already. If you're listening on your podcast platforms, rate and review. Scott, you were at Sheffield United last Friday night, which feels like an eternity ago already.
It feels like a long time ago now, I know.
Yeah, this is the first video we've done since then. The unbeaten stretch is over. But Sunderland, although they got beat, probably answered a few questions.
Yeah.
They played well, didn't they?
It turned into one of those kind of chaotic helter-skelter championship games, didn't it? But you know, for all that there was disappointment at the end, I think you're right. I think it's important not to lose track of the fact that probably for an hour, Sunderland were the better team, created the better chances. You know, obviously when it goes down 10 against 10, the dynamic of the game changes a little bit. But there were big positives to come out of that game. You know, I thought Tommy Watson clearly was an absolutely massive positive, you know, by a million miles, his best performance in a Sunderland shirt. Looked the best player on the pitch for most of that game, which says something given his age and his lack of experience. But I thought Sunderland in midfield was kind of back to its best. I thought they dealt with the Meffam sending off, you know, well. I thought the Briss tactically was really clever after that sending off, playing three at the back, dropping Dan Neil in there when he needed to. It kept Sunderland on the front foot. Clearly, that, you know, the massive disappointment is that they end up losing the game. I think the other, you know, the disappointment, if you want as well, I guess, is that it's another game where they haven't scored. And, you know, I think we'll get to it, but I think there are probably now valid questions to be asked over the strikers and maybe what's needed in January. But, you know, for a game that, like you say, marked the end of the unbeaten run, and obviously Sunderland lost it didn't feel like a bad night as such, did it?
Let's get straight to the goals thing then. We don't want to go on too much about the Sheffield United game because we are 5-6 days on now, and obviously we're looking ahead to the two home games, which have the feel of big home games now. We'll run them across the bottom. You've got Stoke home, Bristol City at home, then Swansea away, then Norwich home, Blackburn away on Boxing Day. 3 of the next 4 at home, 3 opportunities at home. It feels like a good opportunity for someone to get back on track. We'll get to that. But the goals thing, that's 4 of the last 6 games now. They've failed to score. Is that a worry, or are the performances showing you more than what the results and the lack of goals are showing?
I'm going to do the classic cliche thing here of saying a bit of both, but I genuinely do think it's a bit of both. In terms of Sunderland's overall play and the overall strength of that squad, I still think that there's a lot of positives. They're on the bright trajectory. They're doing a lot of things right. You know, we saw it at Bramall Lane. A lot of Sunderland's play was really incisive, you know, slick counter-attacking, good midfield passing, a nice balance to the midfield. They're doing a lot of things right. My worry with them, and it's kind of been there all season, is for me, they don't look like a side who are going to score scruffy goals. And what I mean by that is we've said 4 of the 6 games they haven't scored. Well, certainly in one of the 2 where they did score, we had Dennis Serkin's absolute worldie. Well, he's not going to score many of them. Isidore's goal in the same game, which was nearly as good. It feels a little bit like at the minute that to score a goal, Sunderland either have to score with a world-class strike or a really, really good, incisive passing move that's going to split a defence completely open. What it doesn't feel like Sunderland are going to score, in some ways, is the goal Sheffield United scored on Friday night, which is just a bit of a scruffy bobble around in a box. And a forward player kind of drops on it and just puts it away. And I think that probably comes back to, is Isidore really a number 9? You know, the jury's probably still out on that to a degree, but I think it's undeniable that when he signed, it was largely as a player to play in the wide attacking positions. He's had some really good performances as a number 9, and I think when he plays as a number 9, there's an awful lot of things he does really, really well. He's not a penalty box predator, though, is he? He's not a fox in the box. He's not that type of number 9. Neither's Mayenda, really. And for all that Mayenda had a much better start of the season, I think we all probably expected, I think it's getting pretty clear that Regis Lebris is pretty reluctant to play him for 90 minutes at the minute. He's reluctant to start him. Well, that says something. And Aaron Connolly's come in, and yes, he's had his moments, he's had flashes. But again, we're 2.5 months into the kind of Connolly experiment, and he's still not really starting, which again probably says to a degree where Lebris thinks he's at. So I think we're back to the argument that we've kind of been having a while now of, are Sunderland still missing that striker option?
I was just about to say, you beat me to it there. The obvious question then, and we've been here before, does Sunderland need to sign a striker in January?
I think they do. Yeah, I think they do. But this is where we come back to the older one. It needs to be a certain type, doesn't it? Let's
just stop here, go and have a brew, and we'll just churn out a bit of clip from the summer and just
exactly. But especially in January, there's not much point in Sunderland going out and signing a 17-year-old from the French League 2 who could be brilliant in 18 months' time, but isn't going to do anything for the next 6 months.
Abdullahi, for example. And
to be fair, Abdullahi's going to come back, isn't he? He might be in the mix, but, at the last press conference pre-match I was at with Lebris, I asked him about Abdullahi as opposed to Samed, and he kind of agreed, Samed, once he's fit, should be able to go straight back in. He's got 100 league earn matches under his belt. Abdullahi is completely different. He's going to take time. He's going to need the bedding in period. He's going to need to acclimatise all of this. So, there's no point in Sunderland going out and signing another one of them in January. If they can get somebody with championship experience or a Premier League loan striker who is, yes, it'll be a bit of a gamble if they've not played much football, but they will be much more ready to go into the championship, surely, than a kind of kid from overseas who's going to need all of that bedding in period. Then I think that they could be really, really valuable to Sunderland. I guess what I would say is that in Sunderland's defence, I don't for 1 minute think it's going to be easy to get that type of player in January. And I suspect if that type of player is available, there'll be a whole host of championship clubs who are looking to sign them. So, I accept that. And that's something that Kristjaan Speakman and the rest of the recruitment team are going to have to deal with if they decide they're going to go for a striker. But I think there's a need for one. And I don't think it needs to be another development project at the moment. In the summer, fine. Sign your long-term projects, bring them in for pre-season, work with them, all of that. Yeah. Not in January when Sunderland needs someone now to be able to supplement this attack.
And it was interesting. You wrote the piece earlier this week on We Are Sunderland with Dave Jones. Had been talking to a podcast, and he was saying, was it not the top 20 pod?
It was, yeah.
And he was saying that he whenever he's talking to Kirill and Kristjaan, he points out, look at Ipswich last year, look how many goals Ipswich scored, look at how many strikers Ipswich had, which takes us to January and what Ipswich did last January in the
which was Kiefer Moore, wasn't it?
Game-changing Kiefer Moore striker. Now,
yeah.
Sunderland were obviously one of the clubs who had a look, several championship clubs had a look at Kiefer Moore. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure there is a Kiefer Moore type available.
And that's the issue. You have a brief look around. Clearly there's unlikely to be that type of player at other championship clubs, isn't there? Otherwise, he'd be leading the line for that club. Is there that type of player on the fringe of a Premier League club? There's not obvious ones. If there is, they're probably going to be fairly unproven. A Lancashire, for example, who's constantly being talked about, that type. Can they come in and do the job for Sunderland? Maybe not, but I think that's probably worth having a bit of a punt on in January. If there isn't a more experienced option out there. And like you say, in fairness to Sunderland, there doesn't look to be loads on the fringes of Premier League clubs that you think, okay, get him in straight away, would there?
No, just final one on the striker thing. Is it personnel rather than structural? Do you think if we get to February the 1st and Sunderland haven't signed a centre forward, would you be saying that's potentially it for Sunderland's promotion chances? Do you think it could be that decisive, or do you think?
I don't think it's as clear cut as that. I don't think it's as clear cut as that because Sunderland have shown earlier on this season that they are capable of scoring goals. It's not like Sunderland have gone 3 months without scoring a goal.
They've scored more than the division's top two.
Yeah, they can do it. as I say, I come back to the fact that I look at that squad and I think however you set that team up, I struggle to see how they're going to be able to score, like I said, a kind of scruffy goal that sometimes you just need to win a 1-0 or a 2-1 where it's a pretty unremarkable game. Not an awful lot's happening, but, you get the ball in the box and your centre forward heads it in, or you get in there and the ball just suddenly drops and that striker is in the right place, his instincts are there and he just slots it in the corner. How many of those goals have Sunderland scored this season? Not many.
No. Moving on then, we mentioned those fixtures there, Stoke, Bristol City at home. Regardless of what happened at Sheffield United last week, you looked at these two games as an opportunity to get back on track. And this Stoke game feels particularly decisive because we had the conversation last week, didn't we? Was it 5 games winless or 10 unbeaten? Were you glass half full, glass half empty? How were you assessing it? Well, the obvious mitigation, if you were slightly concerned about the lack of recent wins, was the fact that Sunderland have had a rough run of fixtures.
Yeah.
Stoke and Bristol City at home. If you want to be in the promotion mix of games, you need to be winning.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the last 2 home draws. Coventry is one that got away, but that can happen. That can happen. There will be times in a season in the Championship where you get into a fairly dominant position at home and can't see it out. Okay, one off. West Brom at home in isolation, a draw against a really well-drilled West Brom side when you just can't break them down is not particularly bad, The trouble is now, like you say, if all of a sudden you can't beat Stoke at home and it becomes 3 at home without a win, that then is more worrying because, yes, Stoke will have their threats, Bristol City will have their threats, but Sunderland, yes. So you look at that and you think minimum 4 points, don't you? Really, on the back of not having won in 6 now, I think you've got to be looking at that to then properly be able to kick on into Christmas. Because I think anything less than that, and anything less than that, and not only are you potentially out the top 2, you may be looking at being out the top 6 come kind of Christmas, and that then suddenly becomes a bit more worrying, doesn't it?
Because I understand kind of suggestions that there's been a wobble, that maybe Sunderland are finding the level and we're punching above the weight in the early stages of the season. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but I understand why people would say that. But I think when you actually dig deeper in recent weeks, well, Coventry, they should have won. Millwall, they were a kick away from like a brilliant 1-0 away win. If you go and win 1-0 away at this Millwall side, well, you're not going to get many better results than that this season. West Brom at home, well, West Brom draw every week. And a draw's the least you deserve against Sheffield United. So I think when you take away the results and dig a bit deeper, I don't think Lebris will be at all concerned. But if you don't beat Stoke at home, then you start to ask the question, well, have they lost the knack to get over the line in games? And that's a knack you need if you're going to be in the promotion race.
And I don't want it's going to feel like we're labouring the point here and probably being overly doom and gloom. I don't see if it doesn't go right for Sunderland in these next 2 games, I don't think it'll be because defensively they collapse or anything. I think Sunderland defensively are still rock solid. I think they're arguably the best, one of the best defences in the league. Structurally, Lebris has them set up excellently. He can tweak things in games if it's not working. All of that, absolutely. It's our Sunderland going to be able to score the goals they need to win these games at home. And I think that's what we'll see, clearly in the next 2 games.
That's an old schooler.
I was just going to say there, that's an old schooler. A bit of beauty.
It's like being in lockdown on Zoom again, isn't it? I must stop reading more when we're on. I wouldn't care. That was the best point I've made on one of these videos.
You say that. You say
back to the striker thing then. Who starts up front Saturday? Because you touched on Conley there. For the first few weeks, you understand Conley hasn't had a pre-season for obvious reasons. He's getting up to speed. It's been a couple of months now. Conley really is getting the point where he needs to start making an impact. Isidore hasn't scored many goals of late. Mayenda's been playing on the right. I suspect it'll be Isidore, but would it be a great surprise if Lebris mixed it up?
No, I mean, I suspect it'll be Isidore. I mean, it wouldn't be a great surprise because, for all that, like I say, the overall quality of Isidore's play, and to be honest, I thought he played pretty well against Sheffield United. The overall quality of his play has been there. The goals have dried up. So he could have no complaints if he wasn't in the side. I mean, I think if Connolly doesn't start one of these next 2 games, then I think you'd have to start questioning then, well, where actually is he at in terms of sharpness, fitness, ability, whatever? Because, if Labris is not going to start him in one of these 2 games, then it suggests he's probably not going to start him unless injuries force him to, which is clearly not a great situation to be in. So it wouldn't surprise me if Isidore started Saturday. Now, if Isidore starts on Saturday and scores a hat-trick, you'd want to play him on Tuesday night, wouldn't you? If he doesn't, and yet he still starts on Tuesday, and Connolly's still just coming on for 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there, then I think that's kind of Labris saying, look, I've only really got one striker that I'm prepared to hang my hat on here. I need a bit of help in January.
And what will be interesting in January is this year, Sunderland are entering the window in a position of strength or a position of relative strength, even if results don't go exactly as they'd hoped in the next few weeks. It's very unlikely to fall off a cliff and they're going into January on a back foot, isn't it? I don't know whether you'd seen Sunderland put an interview out with Sporting Director Kristjaan Speakman earlier this week, just a short interview, but he was asked about January in it, and he said, first of all, it's about assessing the squad. Coming from a position of strength, the group is in a really good place. We're doing lots of preparation about what opportunities could be and the what ifs. It's unique because the season is ongoing through the window. We try to be well prepared, but you have to be diligent in the moment and react and action things really quickly. We go into it in a really good spot. We're optimistic about what we can achieve and what we need. So what that absolutely isn't is we're really pleased with the squad and we don't think we need to strengthen it. This suggests there's going to be business. But also I think that point about being able to react and action things quickly. January is one of those windows where things maybe crop up that might not in the summer, or things happen in the last week or 2. I think as long as someone prepared for
that to me screams loan.
Yeah.
Being reactive and being alert to what comes up. Well, that's fine if you're going to loan a player for 6 months, because if it doesn't work, yes, it's a massive disappointment, but it's not a disaster. Clearly, what you don't want to do is be reactive and decide you're going to have a jump at someone and get someone in for 4 years on big money, and then within 6 months, it's obvious they're nowhere near. You know what I mean? So, I think when you talk and that type of signing, it suggests to me, if at some point in the window, the opportunity to get someone in for 6 months, and we're not absolutely sure about it, but it's worth the punt, then I think that's probably the world Sunderland are going to be operating in. And I think that's fair enough. You know what I mean? Yes, you don't want a squad full of loan signings. And yes, the overall project to go into Kristjaan Speakman speak, we all know what that is. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with supplementing that with a loan here and there if you think that it's there's a possibility it can help you out.
And I'm aware of the fact that this is just very January centric now, and I'm sure we'll do vids and pods in the coming weeks. It'll be like that. But we did a piece earlier this week on We Are Sunderland on what Sunderland need to do in January, and both of us led on the striker thing, but also touched on the fact maybe right back a bit of cover there.
Yeah.
I mean, Sunderland have got through in those games when Trey Hume was unavailable, but it was making do, wasn't it, rather than having an orthodox replacement ready to come in.
Yeah, absolutely. Luke, and they were only really able to do that because Ballard and Alesi were coming back. They couldn't have moved Luke O'Nien at other points this season. And then, you look at the left-back situation with Serkin out, and yes, Alesi can play there. Yes, you've got Kjelder, who we've seen at left-back, not necessarily to great effect last season. So, there are options there. I just think that, Sunderland could probably do with one more fullback specialist, couldn't they, just to help them out with that. And again, that probably feels like a Premier League player who's not getting a game at the minute. And it feels like there probably are more fullbacks out there that would fit that bill than centre forwards who can go in and score a load of goals straight away in the Championship. I can't give you a full list of names here, but it feels like it would be surprising if there weren't Premier League clubs that have fullbacks not getting games that would be willing to loan them out for a second half of the season.
We're recording this on Thursday morning. Now I'm headed to the academy this afternoon.
Yeah, you're just coming up there, aren't you?
Yeah. Let's just hope that he's not asked about signing strikers and right backs in January. And he says, no, not interested.
Yeah. I've had the chat with Kristjaan. Absolutely not. Yeah. And anyone who's talking about that's an idiot.
Speaking absolute nonsense. predictions then. Let's do them both. Let's do Stoke and Bristol City at the Stadium of Light. I think I might go 2 home wins. I think performance.
Yeah.
I think results have been harsh on Sunderland in recent weeks, and I think performances have merited more. I don't think either of those teams are great shakes. It was interesting on Stoke, actually, just quickly. Narcisse Palache, they played, was it Burnley who they played last time out? And they got beaten up by Burnley. And Palache has obviously gone in there with a clear view to change the way, to change the approach. I remember watching him earlier this year, and there was a lot of talk in the press room about how young the team was. It was the youngest team ever. Then they get a head coaching like Palache, and you wonder whether Stoke have looked at Sunderland as the model to follow. They've tried everything else in the last few years in the Championship, haven't they? But it was interesting. Yeah. Palache was saying after the Burnley game, we changed the way we played. I had to be more pragmatic, and that's the first time. I can't confess to reading Narcisse Palache quotes every Monday morning, but that's the first time I've become aware of because I watched him earlier this year, and he's very much, this is the way I want my teams to play. This is how I want my sides to look. That's maybe an admission that there are certain games when you need to change tack. It'd be interesting on the back of that, how they set up on Saturday. But I still think Sunderland will just have too much for both teams. And I'm going to go 6 points.
When you say about them kind of following the Sunderland model, it's almost like you get Alex Neil in to manage you, and you think, Christ Almighty, we need to do something different after this. A bit hard, really.
Let's see if their gaffer's talking about the need to sign a striker in January. Then we'll know
exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think. Listen, there's absolutely no reason why Sunderland can't get back-to-back wins, and that's clearly what they should be going for. Back-to-back wins at any stage in the Championship can be difficult. It wouldn't surprise me if they got 4 points, if one of them ended up... I think they might beat Stoke and draw with Bristol City, personally. I would go maybe 2-0 win over Stoke, and maybe ones each against Bristol City, which, like I say, clearly in an ideal world you want 6, but I think at any stage in a Championship season, 4 points from 2 games isn't bad, and it would certainly get Sunderland right back on track. I'd be disappointed if they lost either of them.
Yeah. Or drew both.
Yeah.
Because that's just the lack of momentum.
That all of a sudden then is, 8 without a win, blah, 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 blah. So, I think 4 points feels like a bit of a kind of minimum requirement, and I think they'll get it. Because as we keep saying, and I feel like it's probably been a bit too doom and gloom, this vid, really, because actually... I was sat watching them at Bramall Lane for long periods of that game thinking, God, this Sunderland side is good to watch. Tommy Watson looks, fantastic. Bellingham's kind of back on it. Dan Neil, tactically flexible, dropping in, keeping them going in the second half, all of that kind of stuff. An awful lot of positives. And I still think there are with Sunderland. So, I don't want to be hugely doom and gloom. It's just, we all know the kind of issues that we've probably suspected have kind of been there all season, and do feel like they're coming to the fore a little bit more now. But I still think the bigger picture is rosy.
Excellent. Well, let's wrap it up there. Do subscribe, as I said at the start of the video. If you're watching on YouTube, then subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate that. And get in touch as well if there's anything you want us to discuss, especially ahead of the upcoming January window. We'll do a couple of Q&A vids before that starts. So just shout up in the comments or get in touch with us on X or Blue Sky if you want us to discuss anything in particular.
It's you there on Saturday, isn't it?
I'm there Saturday. Yeah, I'm there Saturday. Subscribe to We Are Sunderland as well. As I said at the start, that's just £1 for 6 months, £12 for the full year. And thanks again to our partners, Cospex Opticians and the Fans Museum. We'll be back next week for our latest episode of We Are Sunderland. Thank you. Take care.